All right, so we're diving deep into So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport, which I'm guessing you're already familiar with since you're here. But when I first saw the title, I thought it was going to be another one of those, like, hustle harder, grind yourself to the bone kind of books. And to be honest, I was pleasantly surprised to find that it's actually a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, it's not really about just working harder or longer. It's more about taking a more thoughtful approach to building a career that's both successful and fulfilling.
I like that. So the book really challenges this whole follow your passion mantra, which honestly feels like it's everywhere these days. Like it's this magical key to career happiness. But Newport introduces this idea of the craftsman mindset versus the passion mindset. And I'm really curious to hear your take on this. What are your initial thoughts on these two approaches to career development?
Well, the passion mindset, I think it can be a bit misleading. Like you're supposed to just wake up one day and have this epiphany about your one true calling, and then
Yeah.
everything just falls into place.
And it's like you have to already know what you're passionate about.
Yeah, exactly. But for most people, it doesn't really work that way. Our passions tend to evolve over time as we learn and grow.
So you're saying it's not like this static thing that you just discover one day and then it's set in stone forever.
Exactly. And the problem with focusing too much on passion is that it can actually hold you back from exploring different options and developing valuable skills.
So instead of obsessing over finding your passion, maybe we should be focusing on building something.
Yes.
Okay, so then what is the craftsman mindset all about?
Well, the craftsman mindset is all about focusing on honing your skills and becoming really good at what you do. It's about finding satisfaction in the process of mastery itself. And it's about building something valuable that others can benefit from.
So instead of chasing some external validation,
It's about developing internal satisfaction.
and that internal satisfaction comes from becoming really good at something. So it's almost like shifting the focus from finding the perfect job to becoming the kind of person who creates perfect opportunities.
Exactly.
And that brings us to this idea of career capital, which is a big part of Newport's book. Can you explain what he means by that?
Sure. So career capital is basically your collection of rare and valuable skills. It's what makes you stand out from the crowd and gives you more control over your work life.
And it's not just about any skills, right? It has to be something that's actually valuable in the marketplace.
Right. It's about developing skills that are in high demand but short supply.
So for example, if you're a software developer, what would career capital look like in that field?
Well, for a software developer, career capital could be mastering a niche programming language like Python or Go, or having a deep understanding of a specific type of software architecture. It could also mean building a reputation for writing clean, efficient code, or contributing to open source projects.
So it's about becoming like a specialist in a particular area.
Yes, exactly.
And what about for someone in a less technical field, like say a teacher?
Well, for a teacher career, capital could involve developing innovative teaching methods or creating engaging curriculum. It could also mean becoming known for building strong relationships with students. Or maybe you're the teacher who champions project-based learning. Or you've become an expert in using technology to personalize education.
So it's not just about the technical skills.
Yeah.
It's also about the soft skills and the relationships you build.
Yes, definitely.
And it's about finding ways to stand out and make a real impact in your chosen field.
Right, and as you build up this career capital,
Hmm.
you start to gain more control over your work life.
So how does that work exactly? How does having more skills lead to more control?
Well, think about it. If you're the go-to person for a particular skill, you have more leverage to negotiate better conditions. You can choose projects you're excited about, and you can even shape your own career trajectory.
Which is huge, right? Because it means you're not just at the mercy of whatever your employer decides.
Exactly.
You have more freedom and autonomy to create the kind of work life you want.
Exactly, and that's a big part of what makes work feel fulfilling.
Having that sense of ownership and control over what you do.
Absolutely.
And this ties back to the idea of mission, which Newport also talks about in the book.
Yes, he argues that finding your mission isn't always about having this aha moment at the start of your career. It often comes later, as you've built up significant career capital.
So instead of waiting around for that magical calling to appear, you're actually building the foundation for it through your work.
Exactly. It's about creating the conditions for your mission to emerge.
It's almost like passion might be a result of mastery, not the other way around.
That's an interesting perspective.
So it's not about ignoring passion altogether, but recognizing that it might not be the starting point.
Right, it's more like the fuel that kicks in once you've gained some momentum.
And how do we gain that momentum? I mean, we've all heard of the 10,000 hour rule, right?
Yeah.
This idea that it takes that much time to master any skill.
Yes, and Newport definitely acknowledges the importance of putting in the hours. But he emphasizes that it's not just about clocking in the time, it's about engaging in what he calls deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice. So it's
Right.
not just about mindlessly repeating the same thing over and over again.
No, it's about focused, strategic effort aimed at improving specific aspects of your skill set. It's about identifying your weaknesses and working on them, even when it's uncomfortable or frustrating.
So it's about pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
Yes, and seeking out feedback so you can continue to improve.
This sounds intense.
It can be, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
But let's be real. Finding the time and energy for deliberate practice can be a challenge,
Oh,
especially in our already busy lives. So how do we make it happen? Any tips from Newport on that front?
that's something we'll dive into further in the next part of our deep dive. Hashtag TTS, the deep dive episode 2025-0129, part 2 of 3.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge to find the time for all this in our busy lives.
But I think the fact that we're even talking about this right now, the fact that you're listening to this deep dive, it means
Right.
you're already taking that first step.
Okay, so what's the next step?
Well, Newport suggests being really intentional about how you schedule your time. So instead of letting your calendar get filled up with meetings and reactive tasks, try blocking off some dedicated time for deliberate practice.
Like actually putting in your calendar.
Yeah, exactly. Treat it like an important appointment with yourself.
I like that. But what about those of us who work in environments where it feels like every minute is already accounted for?
That's where it gets tricky. But even small pockets of focused effort can make a big difference over time.
Okay, so like what? Give me an example.
Well, maybe it's spending 15 minutes each morning reading an article related to your field. Or maybe it's using your lunch break to work on a personal coding project.
So it's about finding those little windows of opportunity and using them strategically.
Exactly. And the key is to be consistent. Think of it like compound interest. Small investments made regularly can lead to significant gains over time.
I like that analogy.
And another important aspect of deliberate practice is seeking out feedback.
So we're not talking about just toiling away in isolation.
No, it's important to have someone who can provide constructive criticism
Huh.
and help you identify areas where you can improve.
So like a mentor or a coach.
Yeah, or even just a colleague who you trust.
It's like having a personal trainer for your career.
Exactly.
Someone who can help you level up your skills faster and more effectively.
And you don't necessarily need to find a formal mentor. Sometimes it's just about being proactive and asking for feedback from people in your network.
That's a good point.
Wow.
We often forget about the resources that are already available to us. Okay, so we've talked about deliberate practice and seeking out feedback. But how does this all tie back to the idea of control?
Well, remember, as you build up your skills and career capital, you gain more leverage to negotiate better working conditions.
So you might be able to work remotely or set your own hours.
Exactly. Or you might be able to choose the projects that you work on.
So the more valuable you become,
Mm.
the more control you have over how, when, and where you work.
Precisely.
But what about those of us who are still trying to figure out our mission? I mean, not everyone has this clear sense of purpose from the get-go.
That's true. And Newport acknowledges that finding your mission can be a bit of a journey.
So it's okay to not have all the answers right away.
Absolutely. And in fact, building career capital can actually help you discover your mission.
How so?
Well, as you become more knowledgeable and skilled in a particular field, you start to see the bigger picture. You understand the nuances, the challenges, and the opportunities. And as you gain experience, you might stumble upon a problem that you're particularly passionate about solving, or a cause that you want to champion.
So instead of searching for a predefined mission, you're creating the conditions for it to emerge organically.
Exactly.
Like the path reveals itself as you walk it.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it's a reminder that the journey is just as important as the destination.
I like that.
But even when you've discovered your mission, the pursuit of mastery doesn't end there.
It's an ongoing process.
Yes, a lifelong commitment to growth and development.
And that brings us to another important point that Newport makes,
Which is,
the importance of control.
yes, he argues that having control over your work is essential for both career success and personal fulfillment.
So it's not just about convenience or comfort. It's about having the agency to shape your work in a way that aligns with your values.
Exactly, and he points out that control is often tied to the amount of career capital you've accumulated.
So the more valuable your skills and knowledge are, the more leverage you have to negotiate for better working conditions.
Right, and to choose projects that excite you, and ultimately to have a greater say in how you spend your time and energy.
It's like career capital is the currency that buys you freedom and autonomy in the workplace.
That's a great analogy.
I know for me personally, I've definitely experienced the difference that having more control can make.
Mm.
I remember earlier in my career, I felt really stuck in a role that was draining my energy and creativity, had very little autonomy, and it was really stifling.
I can imagine.
And I knew I needed to make a change, but I didn't have the skills or experience to command the kind of control that I wanted.
So what did you do?
Well, I realized that I needed to invest in myself. So I started taking online courses, attending industry events, and seeking out mentors who could guide me.
That's great.
It took time and effort, but gradually I started building up my career capital. And as my skills grow, so did my confidence in my ability to advocate for myself.
That makes sense.
And eventually I was able to land a role that gave me the autonomy and creative freedom that I had been craving.
That's awesome.
It's amazing how much of a difference it can make when you feel like you have control over your work.
It really is.
And it's something that I think anyone could achieve with the right mindset and a commitment to deliberate practice.
Absolutely. But it's important to remember that control is not just about external factors, like your job title or your salary. It's also about having control over your own mindset and your approach to work.
So it's about cultivating that internal sense of agency.
Exactly, regardless of your external circumstances.
So how can we apply all these concepts in a practical way?
That's a great question, and it's something that we'll explore further in the final part of our deep dive. Hashtag TTS, the deep dive episode 2025-01-29, part 3 of 3.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Like, how do we actually take all this and make it happen in our own lives?
Right. It's one thing to talk about these ideas, but it's another to actually put them into practice.
So where do we even begin?
Well, I think the first step is to identify those rare and valuable skills that can really set you apart in your field.
And how do we do that?
It might require some research, like looking at industry trends and job postings, and also some introspection, like thinking about what you're naturally good at and what you enjoy doing.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between what the market demands and what you're personally drawn to.
Exactly.
And once you've identified those key skills, then what?
Then it's all about committing to deliberate practice.
Which we talked about earlier.
Right. And this is where the rubber meets the road. It's about setting aside dedicated time to hone those skills, even if it's just for 30 minutes a day.
So consistency is key.
Absolutely. And it's not just about mindless repetition. It's about being intentional and strategic about your learning.
So like breaking down complex skills into smaller chunks.
Yeah, and seeking out feedback from mentors or peers. And reflecting on your progress and identifying areas where you can improve.
It sounds like a lot of work.
It can be, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
And what about the control part? How does that come into play?
Well, as you start to develop those valuable skills and build up your career capital, you'll naturally gain more leverage to negotiate for better working conditions.
So don't be afraid to ask for what you want.
Oh, exactly. Whether it's more challenging projects, flexible work arrangements, or even a raise.
You'd be surprised how much you can achieve when you have valuable skills to offer.
And remember, your mission might not be crystal clear from the get-go, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get hung up on that.
Right. But as you continue to learn and grow, your passions and purpose will likely evolve.
So it's not about finding this preordained path.
No, it's about embracing the journey and trusting that your skills and experiences will guide you.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive.
I agree.
And I think a big takeaway for me is that building a fulfilling career is not about finding the perfect job or chasing some external validation.
It's about investing in yourself.
And developing skills that truly make you valuable.
And ultimately, it's about creating the kind of work life that you want.
So for all of you listening out there, we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought and maybe even inspired you to take action.
Even if it's just one small step.
Like signing up for an online course or reaching out to a potential mentor.
Or blocking off some time in your calendar for deliberate practice.
Whatever it is, just start somewhere.
And remember, becoming so good they can't ignore you is not about overnight success. It's about consistent effort, a commitment to lifelong learning, and a belief in your own potential.
Who knows? Maybe along the way, you'll even discover a passion that you never knew you had.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And we'll see you next time.